All right, everybody, welcome to episode number 2 of Boats and Pros. I'm Nick Irison.
I'm John Economy.
We're here to waste your time. So, last week we talked a little bit about myself, stuff that I'd been working on in the past, how I got involved in this game, and now we're going to do a little bit more of that, I guess, and maybe with some information in between.
So we talked a little bit about IMC Boatworks. Can you explain to me what IMC Boatworks is?
IMC Boatworks is the name of my company, and it's basically fiberglass company that does a little bit of everything. And realistically, it's me and you, and that's about it. There's nobody else that works for us or with us. There have been in the past. I've been very lucky to have a bunch of great guys work for me, especially down in Florida. And I also had a business partner when I first started. Shout out Chris Newport. And basically, IMC Boatworks is the business name that I operate under in the fiberglass ventures. So anything from restoring boats to making parts, whatever I'm doing it under that name for the most part. So at the moment, we're building our coffin box coolers. Those have been gaining a little bit of traction. That's been a long time labor of love. That's been like a girlfriend almost, on and off, lots of ups and downs, but for the most part, it's been a good endeavor. It's just a cooler that goes on the front of a center console fishing boat, and it's called a coffin box because it's rounded on the front. It's kind of got a coffin shape to it, and ours has a toe kick underneath it so that you can get a little bit more walking space around it. And it's a fiberglass cooler, fancy fiberglass cooler.
Awesome. Who came up with that design?
That was actually it was an idea that was brought to us by Captain Ozzy Fisher down in Fort Myers. He fishes off Sanibel. He was getting a new Barker boat. I think it was the 26 Open a few years ago, and they wanted a coffin box up front, and they wanted one that would really fit the size of that boat well. There's a few guys out there making boxes, but nobody really makes a smaller one. So we got with Ozzy, and my business partner at the time, Chris Newport, designed the box in CAD or SolidWorks or whatever it was, and we used those drawings to create plugs. And from those plugs, we made molds, and then from those molds, we slowly figured out the most effective way to build the parts out of them, which has been, uh, like everything in fiberglass, actually, now that I think about it, a huge learning experience. But yeah,
So
that's one of the things we're doing.
would you say those were designed purely for Barker?
They were at the time they were designed very much for Barker, but they were designed with the knowledge in mind that there would be other manufacturers building boats that would have a desire for the box, and there was never a um, exclusive agreement with those guys over there. So it was just kind of like, hey, if you want to build a box that fits the boat and works for Aussie, go ahead. And so that's kind of how it started.
Gotcha. So anyone could buy one.
Absolutely. Anybody could buy one. We've got some manufacturers that we're working with right now who are offering them as options on their boats. But also, you can just go to our website, imcboatworks.com, and you'll find the coffin box option right there in the top of the page. And it basically shortcuts you to my email where you email me and then we talk about what you want and we make you one. They're a little bit custom, so you can choose your color. It costs a couple extra bucks for custom color match gel coat, but most of the guys that are buying one of these things don't really care about that. It's worth it for them to match the boat.
So am I taking this out for like 1 day, 3 days? I mean, how much does it hold?
It's 160 quarts, so it's kind of hard to put into perspective, but it's 38 inches long at the top, 24 inches wide, and 22 inches high. And we were actually, I don't think I told you this, but we were goofing around up at the shop the other day, and my wife and kids came up to see what I was doing, and I have a box sitting up there. And I opened it up, and my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old both climbed in there with plenty of room to spare, and I didn't have to cut them up at all to fit them in. So,
Are they still there?
no, we let them out. Yeah, yep.
So would they have stayed cold in there for a while?
Yeah.
More than a day?
Yeah, these things do hold ice pretty well. They've got an average of 1.5 inches of foam on the sides. It's a little bit less towards the bottom because it tapers. But the lid and the base have about 3 inches of 2-pound density expanding foam. and we used the first one, the prototype one that we made. I used it a lot on my boat, and I used it for our annual Christmas party every year as one of the coolers. And one Christmas party specifically, I remember we were flying out to the UK like 2 days after the Christmas party, and we were gone for 2 weeks. And when I got home, I wouldn't say that there was ice left in the cooler, but the sodas were still refrigerator cold. So
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But yeah, definitely it'll get you through a 2, 3, or 4 day fishing trip. But be prepared to load it down. It takes a lot of ice to fill the thing up.
Sounds like it takes a lot of work too.
Yeah, they're kind of a pain to build. In fact, they're a huge pain in the butt to build. The way that we do them, there's no seams between the where the parts join. We gel coat over everything and wet sand and buff it out, and it's a fully finished part with gas shock that holds the door open, pulls it closed too, which is nice, and a stainless drain and all that stuff. It's it's a very niche item. If you don't have a 24 to 36 foot center console boat that does not have forward seating, then you're probably not looking for this. But those guys who have that specific boat and are looking for a solution to some cooler space and forward seating, and they don't really want to just go with a Yeti or a standard rotomolded cooler, they actually don't have a lot of choices. So this is an option for those guys.
Okay.
And I've kind of come to find that most of those guys that kind of fit in that demographic tend to be career men or people who have a decent income. Some of them could be, you know, working class and whatever level, but they're doing well and they're spending some money on their boat and they're not afraid to spend a couple bucks for essentially another part to the boat. The price of these things, they're $2,500, and it's easy for someone to say, well, I could go get a Yeti cooler for 300 or 400 bucks to do the same thing, and arguably from a function perspective you could, but there's more to it than that. This doesn't look like a Yeti. It doesn't necessarily perform like a Yeti in every way. It brings a little bit of style and finish to the boat, and it's kind of something that you can't just go buy off the shelf. So that's a unique feature that a lot of guys like about it too. It's kind of semi-custom.
All right. So, can you explain to these 7 listeners that we have listening worldwide, how is the coffin box built?
So the coffin box is made of Walter, belly down. The coffin box is built from 4 molds. There's 2 molds for the lid and 2 molds for the base. So the lid has a top and a bottom. The base has an outer shell and an inner liner. So we start by gel coating all 4 molds, and then we laminate the molds with 3 ounces of chop strand mat. We let that kick, then we come back and we add our Trevera, which is a screw retention material where our hinges, our latches, our drains, our shocks go, and we pop everything out of the mold. Before the outer shell gets popped out of the mold, we add an internal flange to the top of that. So if you imagine each part, every mold has a flange on it, which is usually where you would put a little bit of pressure to release the part. Then it goes outwards. So if it was a tub, it would be coming out away from the tub. Well, in this case, we come and we have a jig that we set on top of the mold, and we create a flange that goes inward into the top of the tub. And then we trim that to a very specific size. And then our inner liner goes onto a mounting jig, which has fixture holes on it. And we lower that down into the mold that has the part with the inner liner or the inner flange on it. And we have bolt holes through the mold so everything aligns the same way every time. And we bond those 2 pieces together. We let that cure, and then we drill a hole in the top, and we shoot our 2-pound density foam down into the coffin box. Well, it's still in the mold. So it's in a mold on the outside. It's got a mold inside it for the inner liner, and everything is supported. So when the foam expands, it can't blow the parts out. And then we foam it, and then we have a similar process that we use for the lid. Then we have to fiberglass over those foam holes, gel coat those foam holes. We gel coat the seams on the lid and the box at the same time, and then polish everything up and assemble the parts.
Sounds like a day in the park.
Yeah, it's a few days in the park. Yeah.
So, what else you got going on for IMC?
Well, we got this project that we're slowly getting off the ground here, which is something that I've been looking forward to doing for quite a while. I'm sure most of the people listening to this, all seven of you out there, have heard of the mini jets. They're like little aluminum boats that are, I think they get as small as like 7 or 8 feet, 6 feet even maybe, and
Yeah,
up
that's what
to
I've seen.
yeah, up to around like 13 feet, I think. They're a deal where you can order a kit. You get the panels of aluminum already cut, and you take it to a local welder, or you can buy files, the CAD files, and you can have it all cut locally. It's pretty popular to just buy the material kit and have them welded up. And then a lot of guys will buy a donor ski, like a four-stroke RXP, or man, I honestly couldn't list any of the four-stroke
Major.
skis. Yeah.
Yeah.
SHO, the 1.8 motor out of Yamaha is a popular one, I know, and there's a bunch of them out there, but I'm out of touch with the four-stroke skis because I'm a two-stroke dinosaur. These guys are going up rocky creeks and rivers and stuff and bashing these things and having a real good time, and I've been watching it on the internet over the past couple of years, and I keep thinking to myself that we need to build a fiberglass version of one of these things. You know, the aluminum boat world, nothing against it. I love aluminum. I'm not a welder, so maybe that's part of where what I'm about to say is coming from. But a lot of people underestimate fiberglass. From an engineering perspective, a quarter inch of fiberglass is the same as a quarter inch of aluminum. They can do the same thing. And if you get the right layup schedule, then you can have similar resilience. Having said that, I will just say that I've seen aluminum do some pretty incredible things. So I'm definitely not hating on aluminum boats.
So if it's not aluminum and it's going to be fiberglass, is it going to have the same motor as these mini jets?
We're going to use a similar motor, being that I'm partly balling on a budget for these side projects
Okay.
and partly a two-stroke dinosaur. We're going to find ourselves a Yamaha or a Kawasaki triple cylinder.
Okay.
So that's going to be a 900 or an 1100 if it's in a Cowie. It'll be 1100 or a 1200 if it's in a Yamaha. And those motors are beastly on the power side of things. And if you run them in a stock format, they're pretty reliable, very cheap to obtain. You know, you could get a good donor ski for $300 or $400 all the way up to maybe 12 or $1,500, depending on your luck, your area, how good you are at negotiating. But they're easily attainable. You need to be looking for like a Yamaha Wave Venture, XLT 1200, Kawasaki ZXI 9 or 1100. So we're going to use a two-stroke motor, and we are going to take a mold out of the pump cavity of a 701 VXR, and we're going to make that mold fit into a mold that I already have for a little boat that we call the Bandit. So if you go on the Google and you type in IMC Bandit, maybe we can get our show notes organized here to link that or something. You'll see photos of a little boat that's 15 feet long and it's about 52 inches wide at the top. It's got a Panga-style nose, so it's a pretty aggressive nose that cuts waves really well. Pretty low dead rise, a couple strakes. Very simple little boat that's like almost comparable to a Ginu in some ways, but in my opinion, better in a lot of ways. But it's just like a little sneaky creek bandit kind of deal, basically. You got to see it.
Okay. And you said you already had the mold?
Yeah, I have the mold because the Bandit is a boat that we've been offering as custom builds or semi-custom builds to our customers for a few years. And so they're usually built as an outboard boat with a 25-horse outboard, and we sell them with a 15 or a 20-inch transom. But in this case, we're going to build it with an inboard. That won't be listed for sale, but if it performs really well, then we may sell the hulls as kits for guys where they want to buy the hull and then get their own donor ski and swap the parts themselves, and we'll just kind of give the platform to do that. But that's a maybe, and that's down the road.
So if guys are building this as a kit, what's the layup schedule going to be?
Well, sir, if they're getting the kit from us, they wouldn't need to worry about the layup schedule because we would already have made the boat. But if a guy was at home and wanted to make a similar size and style of boat, I think that's basically what you're asking, right? So first of all, for our listeners that doesn't know what layup schedule means, in the fiberglass boat building realm, layup schedule is basically the recipe for the boat. So it's going to tell you how thick the gel coat should be, which is typically like 18 to 24 mils, ideally 20 mils. and then a skin coat of like chop strand mat or something like that, which you let that cure before you add any of the structural reinforcement to it, and that in an attempt to avoid print through of the weave of the fibers that are going to go in behind that skin coat. Then it'll tell you the thickness of the fabric that you're going to use essentially, and the order that those fabrics are going to go in, and oftentimes it'll specify the resin, and sometimes it might even specify when the layups, which layers go in and which layup session. But so basically the layup schedule is what fabric you're going to use and when. For this boat, and this is mostly, but it's the twofold decision. One is because we're going to take this boat and abuse it, and we're going to try to see what it can take, and we're going to run it up in places that we don't know, and we're going to be sending it. We're not going to be worrying about, is there a rock or a stump or something like that. We just want to get out there and brap. So we're going to put a layer of Kevlar in the very bottom of the hole, which the second part of that reasoning is because I have some Kevlar in the shop. So why not use it? It's not often that you get an opportunity to throw a little Kevlar in the mix. And it's especially not often that you get to be the one to see how well it does if it hits something. So I guess we're going to have a little fun with it from that aspect. But so we'll probably start with a 1.5 ounce skin coat. We'll gel coat the mold, 1.5 ounce skin coat, let that kick. We'll come in and putty the strakes with like a Cabsil mix, maybe with some milled fibers in it. And then probably, I would say we will drop a layer of the Kevlar down the center of the hole. So this is a budget build that we're doing on the side. So I'm not going to be ordering any special exotic fabrics for it. So we're going to use what's on hand. And what we mostly use in the shop is 1708, 3610, and 4808. And the only reason we really use the 4808 is for one specific customer, and we make some panels for them that's what's in their layup schedule. I think I have a roll of 4808 that we could get at least one layer out of. So we'll probably do 1.5 ounce skin, then a layer of Kevlar, a 4808 up the center, running bottom, which is pretty much the whole width of the boat. The whole mold is just barely over 50 inches wide at the gunnels. So down at the water line or down at the chines is one 50-inch space of glass, basically. So one strip of glass runs right up the center and covers the whole running bottom. And then we'll use probably some 24-ounce roving that goes down the freeboard, down the sides of the boat, rolls over the gunnel, and that's going to be it.
Okay. So we've talked about the motor. We've talked about the hull. How are you going to drive it?
It's a great question. In talking about this project, one of the things that we've tried to figure out is if we just want to make this boat like a kind of like a one-trick pony where you just sit down and blast around, and that is all it is, which is what the mini jets are. They're not fishing boats. They're not hunting boats. They're basically river go-karts. So we have to decide if we want ours to just be a fiberglass version of a river go-kart, or if we want it to actually be a boat that you could fish off of, hunt off of, go camping, or go more than just ride around. And I kind of think that we do.
Yeah.
Right? We want a little functionality of this thing.
Yeah.
We don't just ride around. We want to ride around and shoot something when we get there. Or
yeah, be able to have fun, be comfortable.
Something. Yeah, bring some rods. I don't know, something. So
are you thinking stick steer?
I'm thinking stick steer, but I don't think we're going to buy like the stick steer setup. I think we'll use the steering cable that comes out of the donor ski, and we will weld up some kind of improvised stick steer that has like a finger throttle on it. So you'll drive the whole thing with one hand, and it'll basically be set up like an airboat, I think. So it'll be a 2-person boat in like stadium seating, essentially, one in front of the other rather than side by side. And I think the passenger will sit forward and lower, and the driver will sit behind the passenger and further up, so that maybe like the passenger's shoulders are around the driver's knees. So you're looking over the passenger's head, and you're both in like pretty much think airboat. I would say would be the simplest way to answer what I think we're going to do.
So maximum sketch level then?
Yeah. In my research of this little project, I've realized that the Coast Guard regulations don't actually require a horsepower maximum rating for an inboard boat the way they do for an outboard boat. An outboard boat under 20 feet is essentially the most highly regulated boat by the Coast Guard. And if you run the formulas and the Coast Guard safe floating standards, boat builder, blah, 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 the Bandit is rated for 25 horsepower on an outboard. But from an inboard perspective, from my understanding, and not that we're going to be selling this anyway, this is just for our fun, there is no maximum horsepower. And so the Yamaha 1200 motor that we're going to be using or similar is around 120 horsepower.
Okay.
So I think that if we can get the impeller pitch correct, the thing should be pretty much sketchy as hell.
Perfect.
We'll see how much usage we get out of it from a recreational perspective, but if nothing else, we're going to blast it around. I got some buddies down the road that make the aluminum mini jets, so maybe we can get out with those guys one day and find some fun spots.
Awesome. So what else do you have in the IMC stable?
Well, other than the houseboat project that I'm working on, which we'll save that, I think, for its own episode probably. We're coming up in duck season, so the Hellbender guys are going to be messaging me looking for their layout boats. We do the 10 and the 12-foot layouts, so those are basically duck hunting kayaks, for lack of a better term. The 12-foot kind of starts bridging the gap from kayak into canoe territory.
And what are these for?
They're layout boats for hunting ducks, so most guys will throw them on the bow of a different boat, an aluminum boat or some kind of whatever boat they're using, and they'll get within a couple hundred yards of where they're actually going to be duck hunting. And then, for lack of a better term, they'll deploy these things and paddle to where they're going to go, or some guys carry them or drag them, or they originated in the STAs down in Florida. So the areas where it was like a no motor zone, you had to be able to carry the boat a little bit. You know, the 10-footer weighs 45, 50-ish pounds, and the 12-footer weighs, what, 70, 75?
I would say 65-ish.
Yeah, I always say a little more. But yeah, 65 to 75 maybe. But yeah, I think it's closer to the mid-low 70s, which is good for a 12-foot boat. You know, you can get two guys, or a guy and a dog, or two guys and a dog. I'm sure if you were in a bind, or shoot, I don't know how many Cubans you'd get in one of those things.
13.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, you can fit at least 10 decoys in there.
Yeah.
I think 2 decoys equals 1, right?
1 Cuban?
Person.
I think we're out of our depth here.
What's the correct term?
Moving on. So we offer the 10-foot, the 12-foot, the Bull, which is basically built for like a 6 horsepower longtail motor or something like that. It's a really neat looking little. Not really even sure what to compare it to or anything, but if you look up Hellbender Bull, you'll see pictures. And then we have a Louisiana style P-row as well, which is something that we just recently added to the Hellbender line. The most popular last year, the most popular was the 12, and the year before, I think the most popular was the 10.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And we actually just recently got done retooling the 10, and so the way they bond together is a little more slick. I like it a lot, and I think we need to do the same thing with the 12. And we're slowly starting to cross these boats over from just duck hunting to just like a recreational kayak, mostly the 10-footer. Start looking for those in colors other than just hunting colors. I think we need to build a couple of gray ones, maybe.
Yeah. So how would you describe ours versus a kayak you buy from, say, your average town sporting goods store?
Like a rotomolded sit on top kind of.
Yeah.
Well, they're different. You know, those kayaks are great. I mean, there's a lot of companies that have really nice products, and some of them are more durable than others. But the fact of the matter is they're not what I would call a lifetime item. And the main reason I say that is because they're not repairable. Once that plastic's worn through from dragging it or whatever happens on the keel, and you got a split or a thin spot and a little hole, then that thing is retired pretty much. Whereas with fiberglass, you can patch it infinitely if you want to, and probably would wear out at a slower rate it's kind of different users too, because the sit on top kayak guys, a lot of them like to go ocean going, or some of them have the really like kind of highly rigged out boats with the different track systems and the ram mounts and the bottom machines and all these different things. And our boats feel a lot more traditional than that to me. So
Bare bones.
bare bones, and you can modify it yourself, but it's got a lot more of a feel of like that somewhat old timey. Could be a generational item, something that you're going to leave your kid. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll get to leave it to their kid. Like a legitimate my grandpa hunted ducks out of this boat kind of scenario, which you're not going to get that with anything plastic.
No.
You're just
No,
not.
that's cool.
Yeah, it has the potential to be something. Yeah, I would say. So, I mean that, and the fact that it's hand built in the USA. One or two guys are building these things, and you can ask for some custom options. Usually, we're pretty accommodating to our customers as far as whatever their request may be, as long as it's something that we can do or that's reasonable. I mean, we want to see these things out there ripping, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So now that we've got a little more background on you and the company, let's go into some learning.
Yeah, I think that it's been enough of kind of just talking about me and us, and like it's almost awkward to just do that. I think that the reason we're doing this thing is more to talk about projects and help people, or clear up misinformation, whatever it might be. So I guess in part of this second episode here, we're gonna make an attempt to give you guys some information on what we think is a pretty commonly asked about topic, right?
Yeah. So I've got this boat that I'm restoring. It's got a bunch of little dings and ticks and spots where it, hit wrong on the dock, or something hit the side of it. And I want to repair it, but I'm not going to spend $150 for a gallon of gel coat. And when Home Depot, I can get a gallon for $40. What's the difference?
Well, it really depends on what your goals are. I mean, you definitely can't just use some latex house paint and try to patch in gel coat, but I do see what you're saying. And so, in a situation like that, let's just say hypothetically you bought a used boat, and the boat's 10, 15, 20 years old, and it has some spots here and there throughout the boat that need to be repaired. Each spot individually is only the size of maybe between a dime to a silver dollar, or maybe there's some stress cracks that spread out the size of your hand, here and there. And the question for a lot of people becomes, do I try to color match this gel coat and spot in these repair areas, or do I do the repairs and then repaint the whole top side of the boat or hull or whatever it may be, whatever the area in question is? Because the hardest thing with any repair, when we're repairing boats, I choose to refer to a good repair as undetectable. So that's essentially the best metric that the average non-boat person or whoever can use for a repair, right, is that it's undetectable. You can't see it. You don't know that it was repaired. You can't see a blend line. You can't see a difference in the color of the gel coat or paint. You can't see the shape is different. Like it looks like it was new and like nothing ever happened. And so the hardest thing a lot of the time to achieving an undetectable repair is to get a color match on the gel coat that is just that, undetectable. Depending how many spots you have that you're patching out over the surface, you might eventually have so many spots that they're almost all connecting together, and you're teetering on the edge of a full respray anyway. Or it might just be that you, for whatever reason, you can't achieve the correct color, and it's only 2 or 3 small spots over the course of the whole boat, but they're in critical areas, and if you can't get it to look right, then it's going to look like crap, right? Because in this world, for me, what we talk about when it comes to a repair is like intentionality. I don't even know if that's a word.
It can be.
achieving whatever your intention was. If something on a boat, if a texture or a surface or a top coat looks uniform and consistent, then you can get away with a lot. Like take for example webbing, gel coat web coating, like a Carolina skiff or something like that has, where it's like white and then there's like looks
Splatter.
splatter, like black splatter over it, but like it looks pretty good. And if you know that what they were trying to do is take white and splatter black over it, well then they freaking nailed it, right? And so if you set the standard of finish of white with black splattered all over it as what you're calling normal or good, then it's pretty easy to achieve. So it depends kind of where you set your line. But if you've got a brand new boat and let's say it got beat up in a storm or something like that, and for whatever reason maybe you can't reach out to the manufacturer and get a exact match for that gel coat, or you can't order the same gel coat they use. Let's say it's a few years older, the company's out of business, or whatever. This is a hypothetical situation. Then we're going to make a couple of assumptions here that the boat is a variant, the base color of the boat is a variant of white, or I guess it could be black or gray or really any color, but typically bigger boats like that, the base color is a variant of white. So you're not going to take a 40-foot yacht that's got two or three repairs the size of your fist and repaint the whole boat because of it. So in a circumstance like that, there's no doubt that if the boat is not already painted and it's a gel coat finished boat, that you're going to have to take some white gel coat and match the color of white that is. So a lot of people don't know this, but there are thousands of variations of the color white. Saying white is insane. It's kind of more reasonable to say black is black, although even then it seems like there's some variations, but there's whites that have a yellow tint to them, there's whites that have a gray tint to them, there's whites that have a blue tint to them, there's white that have a red peachy tint to them, there's extremely bright whites. When you really start looking and thinking about the color white, it's very easy to realize that it's on a very large spectrum. So you can't just get some white gel coat and put it on a white boat and expect it to match. Almost every time, what you're going to do is get essentially the whitest gel coat that you can find, which is base white, is what most manufacturers sell it as. And then you have pigments, which are going to be, there's tons of them, but your core colors, the main ones that I use would be black, gray, burnt umber, buckskin brown, yellow oxide, yellow, red, phthalo green, blue, and white, which if you're in a situation where you're trying to add white pigment to bring your white gel coat back, here's a clue. You need to add gel coat instead. But that's getting off track a little bit. So you take all these different gel coat pigments and you basically start with a white base. And I personally, and there's a whole episode to be had on color matching, so I'm not going to get too deep in this because we can't get into all that right now. But basically you add a little bit of different pigments at a time using a guess and check method to get the gel coat as close as you can. Alternatively, you can take a panel or a piece of the gel coat and send it out to a company like Spectrum. Typically, they would want to dispose of their sample, so I guess you could, I'm sure if you're willing to pay some extra money, send them a hatch and have them scan it and send it back to you. I've even heard of circumstances of people who are really in a bind and couldn't get a match of taking a gel-coated boat and having a paint company come and using a paint scanning machine like an Oracle that PPG uses and getting some single-stage paint that will match the gel coat as close as they can get and sneakily blending in some paint areas into some gel coat here and there, which that's some dark magic right there. You don't want to go down that road. But
No.
these are the things that happen in the pursuit of a color match when it comes to repairing gel coat.
So are you saying no rules apply?
Yeah, that's not really what was in my head when I was saying it, but in summary of what I said, yeah, at the end of the day, with all this stuff, we're out there to get a job done and whatever it takes to make the customer happy and achieve the goal and bring home that paycheck. Yeah, there's no rules in that, baby.
So why would you use gel coat over paint, though?
Well, gel coat is inherently going to be in almost every FRP product that is made. It's the first layer that goes into the mold. If you try to just take fiberglass and apply it directly into the mold with no gel coat, then when you release that part, it's the surface of it will be covered in pinholes, microscopic little air bubbles that are just you can't roll them out. It doesn't matter how hard you try. It's just unless you were to degas the resin or infuse it or something like from a hand lay perspective, just kicking resin and laying it up with a roller and a brush, you're going to have these pinholes. The gel coat is more often than not sprayed into the mold, but it can be brushed into the mold. But in theory, it lays down with no pinholes on the surface. So it mirrors perfectly the surface of the mold. And when applied thick enough, it cures by itself. And then the resin backs that up. And gel coat is really nothing but resin with some additives. Essentially, I mean, they're not quite brother and sister, but they're real close cousins. Like it's the same stuff with some other stuff. If we're gonna really, really oversimplify it,
You're saying they're from Alabama.
they're from that neck of the woods.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
So it's only logical to apply the gel coat. And so if you're gonna have to put the gel coat in the mold anyway, and you can pigment the gel coat, well then you've got a paint job built into the gel coat, right? So if the boat needs to be blue and you have to gel coat the mold, and you can make your gel coat blue, then you just killed two birds with one stone by spraying blue gel coat into your mold, right?
Yep.
There are the majority of boat manufacturers do this. There are some boat manufacturers out there, Nortec is one of them that comes to mind immediately because they're from my hometown, that will lay up a boat with white gel coat, and then they have a whole paint department. They take that boat and they put a custom high quality PPG paint job on that boat. And then in theory, for future repairs, you have paint codes that you can match colors to, and you're not playing with color matching games. So that's in theory. That's assuming that you can get a hold of the painter, get the codes from them, so on and so forth. But so basically, the question of the why gel coat is because it's already going to be there anyway. So it wouldn't make sense for most boat manufacturers to gel coat a boat and then pull it out of the mold and paint it unless there were some extenuating circumstances to that. Like Nortec, if you look at their boats, you'll understand. They're not just one color boats. They're like these incredibly detailed, painted, really cool, high-end performance boats.
Didn't you know the upholsterer, Nortec, right?
I think Jamie did work for Nortec. When I did Car Warriors, Jamie Borg was our interior guy, and he was one of the coolest dudes I've ever had a chance to work with. He did these super high-end hand-stitched and machine-stitched interiors, ostrich, alligator, built-in LEDs. I'm sure it's unlikely that he would ever hear this, but if you hear this, shout out Jamie Borg. You are the man. Car Warriors, Season 2, Episode 5. That's right.
I'm guessing since you spray the gel in the mold, it's going to come out a lot better than if I sprayed paint on a part, right?
You have to compare apples to apples. So let's talk about spraying the gel coat in the mold versus spraying gel coat out of the mold. So when you spray the gel coat in the mold, the gel coat lays on the surface of the mold and creates an exact opposite mirror of the surface of the mold. So if your mold is smooth, flat, shiny, glossed out, polished, then that's exactly what your gel coat's going to be when you pull it out of the mold. Now, let's say that you have a boat and you're going to try to respray the whole thing with gel coat. First of all, you're going to have to decide which surfacing additives you're going to use. And spraying gel coat post-mold is and will be a whole episode of its own also. But suffice to say that it's two very different things. To properly use gel coat, you should not introduce any solvents into it to reduce it, which is the hardest rule not to break because gel coat is so thick, the only way that you can get it to flow out of a spray gun, even remotely nicely, is to reduce it down. And typically, the inclination of a painter to reduce something is to add a solvent, like acetone, styrene, MEK, solvent, any of those things. And that inhibits the cure of the gel coat, and it actually affects the quality, the gloss, retention, and the UV resistance of the gel coat into the future of the product, which is why almost every single time you see a boat that's been repaired and then left out in the sun for a year or two or three, the repairs are never the same color, which I'm sure they were when they were repaired, and the repairs are never of similar level of glossiness essentially they age differently and they stick out like a sore thumb. And one of the main reasons for that is because a solvent was introduced into the gel coat when it was applied. You have all these different things that you have to contend with when you spray gel coat. So in order not to introduce a solvent, that means you have to spray it thicker. There are some very, very industry specific gel coat thinners that you can get if you know the part number to order and you have a large supplier like Compoint or something like that. But for your backyard guy, the closest thing you're going to get and the best option is something like Duratec gloss additive. You get your gel coat, you order some Duratec gloss additive, and depending on how much color coverage you need, you can add the Duratec up to, I think, like 40%. And that is going to help with the gel coat cure, and it's also going to help the gel coat thin down and lay out a little bit. But no matter what you do, the gel coat is still always going to be like, you're going to have to start with at least 600 no matter what you do. You're going to have to work 6, 8, 1,000 or 600, 1,200 if you're willing to buff a little bit or whatever your preferred stepping through the grits is. There's essentially never, ever, ever, no matter what you add to it or what you do, a circumstance where you just spray gel coat and walk away from it. So from a post-mold application, which is basically any kind of refinishing or repair, anything other than making a brand new part, gel coat will always need to be post-finished. Whereas if you were restoring a boat and you chose to paint it, you could prep the boat, prime the boat, sand the primer, mask everything up, and in theory, let's say you had a clean environment, no contaminants in the air, and you were able to spray a quote-unquote perfect paint job, and nothing was introduced into it before it cured, then you could walk away from that paint job as soon as you spray it, whether it's a base coat and clear or a single stage like all grip, all craft, something like that. And if it dries and it looks good, that's it, you're done. With paint, you do your sanding before the application, and if you have some little areas to touch up, or like if you're looking for a really, really super high-end finish, like if I was doing an all-grip paint job and someone said to me, I want this to be the best it can possibly be, then I would put on 3, maybe even 4 coats of all craft, and then the next day I would cut it. I might even give it 2 or 3 days, depending on what the color was and the time of year, and then I would cut it back, maybe starting with 800 or 1,000, as long as everything went smoothly. Take it to 12 or 1,500, give it a day to cure after that, and buff it out, and you can get it really, really, really nice. But you're talking about taking it from a difference of 95% to, and I'm exaggerating here, but 110%. You can, using paint, achieve what I like to call a walk-away finish, where you spray it, you clean your gun, you walk away, and you're done. You unmask the thing, and you go to the lake. And that's never happening with gel coat. So after you spray your gel coat, you have to let it cure. Then you have to sand through the grits and polish it after that. You know, gel coat does have its rewarding attributes as well. It's applied thicker. You know, paint is maybe 6 or 7 mils, and gel coat is 20 mils. So you've got a little bit of abrasion resistance there. You know, one of the downsides to paint is that if you paint over gel coat and you have a different color, let's say it's a white gel coated boat and you paint it black, just to make it simple. If you scratch the paint, you're going to see that white gel coat under the black paint. That is one circumstance where, you know, paint shows its weakness a little bit through gel coat because the paint just isn't applied as thick. But for the most part, they're two things that achieve the same job, but they come at it kind of from different angles. So if you're trying to decide if you need to use paint or gel coat on a restoration project or something like that, for example, then I guess the questions that you need to ask yourself would be, am I painting the whole thing? Or is 90, 95+% of it good? And I have a couple of very small specific areas that I'm trying to patch in, and the entirety of the rest of it is gel coat that's in good condition. If that's your circumstance, if almost all of it is a good condition gel coat and you just have very small specific areas that you're trying to patch, then I would recommend that you try to color match some gel coat and spot those areas in. In reality, from the restoration projects and things that I've seen in the past, that very specific circumstance is rare, very rare. A lot of the time, if you're doing something like that and you've got areas that are needing repair, a lot of the time the remaining surfaces that don't technically need repair aren't exactly in great condition either, and you start finding yourself in this muddy territory of, well, the rest of it's okay, but this is definitely not good. Are we going to just repair this area and get it all right and then match the rest of the okayness and buff it up? Or are we going to try to take the entire surface area here and bring it all to really good, which in that circumstance is going to require either a fresh gel coating or fresh paint job. When it comes to a choice between those two, if I'm spraying the entire thing, let's just say that I don't have to blend or patch anything, and it's the entire top side of a boat. I'm shooting it either all with gel coat or all with paint. That's an easy choice for me. I'm choosing paint. I'm choosing Allcraft or Emeron or Alex Seal or one of those things, because I at least have a chance that I can spray it all on there really nice and walk away from it. And worst case scenario, I might have a few little areas that I've got to touch up. Whereas if I spray it with gel coat, even if I nail it, even if I spray it the best anyone ever sprayed gel coat, ever, I'm still going to be at very best blocking it back at 1,000 grit or DAing it at 1,000 grit if you're a savage, and then polishing it. So I would rather roll the dice with paint, knowing that I can probably, if I'm a decent painter, which I'll say that I'm a decent painter, I can shoot out a paint job that for the most part is satisfactory, and I can bring it all the way to really nice if I need to, or if I really take the time to set up the circumstances. We've pulled off some really nice paint jobs, but I don't have a booth or anything like that. We're a fiberglass shop, we're not a paint shop. Having said that, if I get to choose between spraying paint or spraying gel coat, I'm spraying paint. I'm spraying all grip, baby. You can take that to the bank.
What about below the waterline?
Oh, you dirty dog. That is a tricky, tough question. Below the waterline, paint, like all grip stuff like that, you read the data sheets, it is not approved for below the waterline. It is not intended to be exposed to water for more than, don't quote me on this, but I'm just going to put 12 hours. And it could take it a little bit. Like, let's say that you have a boat and you want to refinish the whole thing and you don't want to re-gel the bottom, and you spray the bottom with white all grip, and you always trailer the boat. You put it in the water, you never beach it, you drive it around, you pull it back on the trailer, and one time a year you go to the Keys for 2 or 3 days. Let's say the boat stays in the water for 72 hours. I would say that would be the upper end of what you would do to a all grip paint job, even if you did like 545 epoxy sealer, like anything beyond 3 days, and you're opening the door to some osmotic blistering and things like that. Whereas gel coat, in theory, and it's not 100% impermeable to water, but can take much, much, much more exposure below the waterline than paint.
So your take on the entire thing would be that you prefer paint for the walk away factor, but the durability and the longevity is going to be with gel coat. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're correct in those things. I would add to that, though, that it is a case-by-case basis. So if we're talking about a repair perspective, then the questions I'm asking myself to make the decision between paint and gel coat are more like, am I repairing a very small part of a larger thing that's in good condition, and the rest of the thing that's in good condition is already gel coated? Then yeah, I'm going to use gel coat. That's a no-brainer. Versus a circumstance, let's say we have a large thing that's in mediocre, so-so condition, and they're asking you to repair only part of it, but you cannot really match a good repair to a so-so condition rest of the surface, right? So it's kind of like, let's say you ask me to repair a corner on your hardtop, but the entire surface of the hardtop is a 6 out of 10 at best, because it's all kind of chewed up and oxidized, and the gel coat's thin in some spots, and it's got nicks and dings all over the place. Then when I repair this corner, what am I supposed to match it to? The craft that you have? So then the whole thing needs to be redone, right? So then the question becomes, okay, we're going to shoot this whole thing. Now we're going to use paint, because we're spraying the whole thing. We're going to hit the gloss the first time, and we're going to be done with it. I don't know if that kind of explains it enough, but like, if you're painting all of it, then you're going to paint it. If you're touching it in, then you're going to gel coat it because it's already gel coated.
Good to know. Good to know. I think on that, I think we can call this episode in the books.
Yeah, let's wrap this thing up. I think that next time I'm going to try to get in the Facebook group in the fiberglass and composites tips and tricks group. Join that if you're not a member. I'm going to see if I can't get some topics of discussion from our members over there. I think we got 85,000 members across the world over there. So
Wow.
we should be able to come up with some good talking points. So you got anything to add?
No, I think we nailed it on that one.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. God bless you. When it comes to a project, just make sure you're thinking it out before you get yourself all sticky. And you probably can apply that to a lot of life, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
See you later.